Hi, I'm Lady Genevieve. It feels like it's been 84 years since I had a new DCEU film to talk about. That's not a Wonder Woman 1984 reference, by the way, even though that was the last time that I really went in depth to talk about a new DCEU film. More specifically, it was when I posted my video essay about Maxwell Lorenzano. Nothing in the DCEU has creatively inspired me since him, but this year we are getting back on track and we are getting new DCEU films, which brings us to the topic of today's video, Matt Reeves' The Batman. I'm going to make the first part of this video spoiler-free, give some broad strokes thoughts and impressions before I get into the spoiler discussion, and I will warn you beforehand so you will have the option to click off if you deem it necessary to do so. First point, we can just get out of the way. I did not remember going into the viewing experience that this is a 3-hour film. I wish that I had remembered that going into it because it did mess with my equilibrium a bit to be approaching the 2-hour mark and feeling like, isn't this about when things should be wrapping up? Are they doing some weird, ambiguous, open-ended ending because Matt basically already knows that he has a trilogy on lock? But then eventually I figured out, that's right, this is a 3-hour film. They already made that announcement a while back, and you just forgot that they told you this already. This is purely speculative on my part, so please don't take my words as an outright claim. I believe it is within the realm of possibility that the ultimate cut of Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice may have possibly helped whatever discussions were had to permit this film to do 3 hours right from the start as a theatrical release. If you look back at Christopher Nolan's trilogy, it did get to be longer than 2 hours right from the start, and each film was increasingly longer than the last, but The Dark Knight Rises was still a shorter film than The Batman. Maybe it's tedious to some to hear discussions about runtimes. I don't mind a longer runtime, just so we're clear, and I only think that it warrants a mention now and then simply because runtimes do impact the business side of things. If you cannot do as many screenings of a film in a day because of the runtime, that's going to add up, and you had better believe that these Wall Street bros, the stockholders who own the Batman rights, they really care about making a profit off of Batman. Matt Reeves was definitely right when he talked at DC Fandom about how this film was going to be a detective film. It had that neo-noir element to it. It was part crime drama, part psychological thriller, part mystery, with that mystery being what Batman needed to solve in the story. The film has a lot of villains, and if they did not have the 3-hour runtime, I don't think they would have been able to effectively use these villains in the ways that they did. I was mostly satisfied with the execution of the villain material, but the film still definitely had a slow burn approach. So if you're wanting the more standard, superficial popcorn spectacle, this probably wouldn't be the right fit for that particular movie day. In watching the film, it really felt like it took forever to let me start to get to know who this new Bruce Wayne is, where he's at in his journey. But once all was said and done, I felt like I did get answers to my questions about him. If this was the only film that they were planning to do and there wasn't this built-in understanding that Matt is meant to be doing a full Batman trilogy, I might have felt like there should have been more probing into Bruce's psyche. But if Matt is pacing for a trilogy in which there will presumably be different types of character deconstruction and exploration and evolution, then this is a perfectly fine way to start off the trilogy. Since I know it's often asked, I will also add that there really isn't anything of note that you need to sit and wait for after the credits. I'm honestly getting sick of the post-credits thing, if I'm being honest. I personally don't need them. What I do need to come back, though, are bloopers in credits. Maybe tonally it would be weird to include them after a serious drama, which The Batman definitely would be classified as, but how can anyone rewatch the Rush Hour films and see Chris Tucker getting a call in the middle of filming? He answers the call, and then he hands the phone to Jackie Chan, and Jackie scolds the person for calling them when they're trying to film a movie. We need to bring that back.
No! They want to speak to you, Jack.
Hello?
I'm sorry about this. We are filming right now.
Anyway, I want to talk about spoilers, so let's just get into those. I'm assuming this will be a big movie that a lot of people see, so we might as well not wait around to talk about them. Robert Pattinson as Batman and Zoe Kravitz as Selina Kyle. They're both fine. I don't have any issues with either one of them. What I do have an issue with, though, is that there was not enough Alfred. How are you going to give me Andy Serkis, the man who consistently outacts anyone and everyone, but gets slept on by these antiquated award shows, and then barely use him in the movie except for a bit of angsty cannon fodder? He had maybe one scene of note where he's in the hospital and he and Bruce really get to have it out because of the lies, the deception, you deceived me.
The deception! The betrayal, man, you deceived me!
More Andy Serkis Alfred in the sequel, Matt Reeves, or we will have issues. And I don't want to have issues with Matt Reeves. I like Matt Reeves. The relationship between Bruce and Selina was more interesting than I expected it to be. I liked that they incorporated this additional element of class disparity where it's not just a rehash of the usual, I need to lie to her to keep her safe concept. I don't mind that trope when it's done well, but I also feel like we've seen it a lot, and the way that I read the subtext of their interactions in this film was that part of why Bruce is hesitant to tell her who he really is because she's giving that eat the rich energy, or at least the second best version of that, which is rob the rich. It's what they deserve, since the only way they can get that rich in the first place is by robbing others through pillaging, exploiting workers for their labor, and so on and so forth. Now we can go through the villains, as there were several of them. We can go through them in a sort of sequential order. So first we have Colin Farrell as Penguin. A serve. I could go on a tangent about how these hot actors need to stop masquerading themselves as unattractive people because unattractive people face an uphill battle when auditioning for things, but I don't have all day for that, and I'm assuming neither do you. Yeah, Colin Farrell's Penguin was a massive crowd favorite in the screening that I was at. He was chewing that scenery, and I thoroughly enjoyed watching it. The audience kept laughing whenever he was hamming it up. I want to go to whatever party Colin Farrell's Penguin and Jared Leto's Paolo Gucci are at. Just hot actors pretending they're not hot and being hammy with a sprinkle of camp. I feel like that's the vibe that I'm now learning is something that I really, really enjoy.
You're a character. The tiny little moose is a character. Who knew?
I'll have you know that's one of my favorite films. Ridley Scott did everything last year, and he did all of that for us. Anyway, Penguin is clearly being set up to rise up the ranks of the world of traditional organized crime, since there's a new space that has become open for him to take over. I would love to see him brought back and used in an even more prominent position as a villain within the larger narrative of whatever film he returns in. I like that Matt seems to be taking this approach of digging into the wealth of characters available to him and let them all make their appearances, since they're all meant to be in this cursed city anyway, that's known as Gotham. It's giving me Batman and Robin vibes, aka how many villains do you want in your Batman film? And the answer to that question is yes. Then we move up to Carmine Falcone. I found it interesting that they didn't give a clear-cut answer in the narrative about whether or not Falcone was the one to kill Bruce's parents. My reading of the way that whole part of the story played out was that it was deliberately left open to interpretation. There are bound to be people who watch the film and feel confident that he was in fact responsible, but then there are others, like myself, who do not interpret it that way. The whole arc for Bruce as a character is that his mantra that he was using, I am vengeance, was philosophically and ideologically not productive, and ultimately he decided that is not the way that he wants to live his life. Therefore, the logistics of which specific criminal in Gotham was the one to do it doesn't ultimately matter because there are much bigger problems than billionaire Bruce Wayne's childhood trauma. Not like he can't afford therapy anyway. I also liked the payoff with Carmine Falcone's arc with Selina. This might seem like a petty detail to fixate on, but it's my channel and my opinions. When they kept showing her throughout the film and the fact that she had these long claws for her nails, and those were her nails, they weren't just attachments to gloves. So whether they were grown herself or they were more likely acrylics, I was so distracted every time I would see them because she was out here going on these action-packed missions with these nails, and it had me thinking, I don't even have to look up the trivia to know this movie was written by straight men. But then when Selina scratched up Carmine Falcone's face with those nails, I went, all right, I'll allow the impracticality because the payoff was worth it. Then we get to the Riddler. Paul, unsurprisingly, did a great job. I like that the marketing did not give too much away about what he was up to, because once they really revealed who he was, everything he got up to, it was really fun to watch. Admittedly, when the film first started, I didn't know if I liked him as a character because I didn't remember that the film was going to be 3 hours long and they were keeping a lot to do with his character shrouded in mystery. They took the creative approach of not showing us everything about him because that would have been an option to show us the audience but then not show Batman, so Batman is left wandering around not knowing who his foe is. So at the start of the film, I couldn't really get a read on him in the story and whether or not I thought the character was interesting. Similar to Selina's cat claws, the Riddler reveal was so worth the payoff. There are more things I want to get into related to the Riddler's material, but before I do that, I should probably quickly touch on the other villain. We got ourselves a Joker cameo. Barry Keoghan.
Barry Keoghan.
Who is he?
It was interesting. I knew he was supposed to be in the film, but while most of the film was playing out, there was just so much else going on that I wasn't thinking about when and where he would be making his appearance. But once the main storylines for this film had seemingly played out to their conclusion, Batman saved a lot of people at the stadium, that was when I started to wonder, wasn't Barry supposed to be in this? And then we got to Arkham and we started to hear someone talking and I just went, oh, he's here. He had a line that mentioned a clown, so I think most of us are of the belief that he is the Joker. But I did also wonder in the heat of the moment if there was the slight possibility that he could be playing Two-Face, because from the limited glimpse that we could see of his face, it looked like there might have been some disfigurement there. Of course, I think Barry could play a great Joker, but I also think it would be fun if he was actually playing Two-Face, simply because everyone always goes for Joker, and it would be refreshing to subvert from those expectations. But in the long run, as long as the story is interesting, I don't really care which villain he plays. It's also fun the way that Matt has embraced the fact that not only are there many villains to choose from in the larger Batman lore, but he also is perfectly happy to have them interact with one another in different capacities. Penguin's still around, Riddler's still around, and now we've also got most likely Joker coming into play. Matt Reeves is keeping his proverbial foot on Robert Pattinson's neck, and I like that. Give him hell, make him struggle. There are some deeper thematic components of the film that ultimately ended up being a large reason of why I liked this film. When the film starts, I don't know the exact time breakdown, so maybe it's the first hour or so, I could not get a read on what they were trying to address. You had these references to political elections, organized crime, and the first person that the Riddler kills was someone who I believe boasted about being tough when it came to the war on drugs. As all of this was going on, I was trying to put together what the socio-political subtext was, and it wasn't immediately evident because, like I said earlier, a lot of things when the film begins were shrouded in mystery. I actually wasn't sure if I was going to rate this film highly until I got to the second half of the film. Once they started to reveal that the police, the broader law enforcement figureheads, and the mafia were all working together, pretending, posturing to be cleaning up the city, handling the drug problem by being tough on it, when they were doing the exact opposite in order to make money. I cannot watch something like that in The Batman without thinking about the US unleashing all types of wars, things like Operation Condor on Latin America. And that particular timeline very conveniently lines up with there being a crack problem, an heroina problem in the US. And then you fast forward a bit to when the US illegal, highly unethical, to put it lightly, occupation of Afghanistan. Very coincidentally, the numbers for the opioid epidemic. What odd timing. For a film like The Batman to resonate with me, it needed to do precisely this. It needed to tap into deeper socio-political subtext and commentary that would give me things to think about, to talk about, and maybe I will circle back around at some point and do a more formal video about it. I don't know just yet. The Batman astutely recognizes that all of these entities, politicians, law enforcement, they engage in theater of the most insidious kind. And I find it even more interesting how it was billionaire funding that allowed this large organized crime syndicate between politicians, law enforcement, and the mafia to flourish. The accuracy of that is incredible to watch. It's at the cost of the people at large, and it also has the added cost of exploiting and trafficking women. Really, the one thing that I wish they had done differently is a detail specific to the reveal regarding Thomas Wayne. When they first started to claim that Thomas Wayne was involved in this assassination of a journalist, I was shocked. The gag of it all. But when they seemed to back away from that reveal, and Alfred was claiming that no, Thomas Wayne definitely was a benevolent billionaire, there's no such thing. He's still our beloved oligarch. No, bad backpedaling. Thomas Wayne should have been bad. I needed the film to commit to this concept because it was a really, really cool concept. When they were showing all that backstory about how the Waynes and the Arkhams were the founding families of the city, I was living for the call out. Do I believe that a founding family deeply entrenched in generational wealth would be the ones to create a giant prison system that I would bet is a for-profit prison system because it's in the US? I sure do. You're not going to tell me that Arkham is in any way helpful to Gotham. When have any of these supervillains that get locked up in Arkham ever been successfully treated and rehabilitated into being able to reintegrate into society to live happy, healthy lives? Exactly. That's what I thought. Really, if I were to speculate, I would guess that part of the reason for the lack of direct, unflinching follow-through on billionaires being bad is that the stockholders of Batman do not want to be called out like that. Ooh, even the backstory for this version of the Riddler successfully does something similar to what Joaquin Phoenix's Joker does, which is present how systemic economic inequality under a capitalist system is a breeding ground for trauma, mentally, emotionally, psychologically, which in turn fosters higher rates of violence and crime. When the Riddler started popping off with his manifesto, I kept going, you're right. When he pointed out that Bruce's orphan status is in no way anything equivalent to what all of the orphans at the Riddler's orphanage had to experience, where was the lie? The thing about providing insightful commentary of this kind, and to this degree in a big IP blockbuster, is you usually have to do it subtextually to get away with it. You slip it into the villain's dialogue, to the villain's backstory, so that all the rich Wall Street bros who own the rights to Batman cannot yell at you for calling them out. But the masses, the people at large who are suffering under those very same oppressive systems, they watch the Batman and they hear the Riddler's speech and go, but he's right. Why am I supposed to act like you crying in your mansion where you have all of your needs met? And also, an important detail, Bruce had Alfred to take care of him and show him love and support. Why am I supposed to act like your problems are in any way at the same level as these kids at the orphanage who do not have the economic safety net to permanently guarantee the ground level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs are met? You've had decades and every resource available to work on fulfilling those other levels, and you've done nothing with it. No tears will be shed for billionaires who brood in their mansions. None. The thing about Batman is the people who own the rights to him will always push out more Batman movies. They want to keep milking that cash cow. But I'm glad that a storyteller like Matt Reeves has not shied away from challenging the concept of engaging in hero worship towards billionaires. There is more I could probably say, but I actually have another review to work on right after this, so stay tuned for that. Give this video a like if billionaires need to have their fortunes expropriated. Bye!